Good evening, Montreal. Welcome to another edition of the Suburban Radio Hour. It's Beryl Wiseman, editor-in-chief of Suburban newspaper. I'm here with my colleagues, Anthony Bonaparte, features editor, Mark Lidbetter, sports editor, and Mike Cohen will be giving us all the rundown on all the entertainment society news you need. It was, as always, a busy week in the news. Pick up our paper, go online, go on the app. We go in depth into the Bill 21 ruling, the new sticker law. That's the latest language irritant. The Artgate parents on the West Island are upping their lawsuits. Hydro supposedly got a new plan to cut outages in the West End and West Island. It might help Côte-des-Neiges and NDG, but might not extend much further. And Pierrefonds Roxborough Mayor Jim Bass is asking the Desjardins Group to reconsider their stance on flood zone mortgages, which they want to cut. But perhaps the story of the week, the story of the past several weeks, and when these things happen, it's a time for reflection on who we are as Quebecers, of course, who we are as Canadians. It's the passing of the Right Honourable Brian Mulroney, 18th Prime Minister of Canada. I knew him well, but my guest knew him very closely and worked with him very closely for 3 to 4 decades. And it's my great pleasure to have our great friend, Senator Leo Housakis, former Speaker of the Senate, Senator from Montreal, with us. Senator, thank you for taking the time.
Good to be with you, Beryl.
This was an era, if we can call them any era of somebody who was in office for 2 terms. It seemed to have been a time when we seem to feel better about ourselves. We seem to play a more clear role on the world stage. There seemed to be a different feeling in the country. What are your best memories of starting your career with this man?
Look, it's a great loss for Canada. We lost a great statesman, someone respected on the world scene, and a transformational prime minister that did great things, and history will judge him very, very favorably. My memories were a young teenager who was growing an interest in public service and public life, and I got to become a member of the Progressive Conservative Party at the time under his leadership, and he really represented what true leadership is all about. He made everybody around him better. He gave everybody hope in difficult situations. He always rose to the occasion to do the right things, and is someone I will remember fondly as someone who inspired me to stay involved in public life now for 40 years.
Prime Minister Mulroney led the world on many initiatives, most outstanding of which was, even in the face of American opposition, wanting the Western world, the Western liberalized democracies, to impose sanctions on South Africa, to fight apartheid. Many Canadians will remember, of course, the Shamrock Summit. He had a very close relationship with President Reagan, but he also had a great relationship with President Bush, and in fact, he gave eulogies at both their funerals. It was a time of a different kind of conservatism that we don't see in America anymore. Do you get that feeling as well?
Look, there's no doubt, as I said earlier, Mr. Mulroney was one of the great statesmen on the world scene. He, along with his buddies Margaret Thatcher and President Reagan and President Bush, they took on the Soviet Union. They did the right things. They provided leadership in those dark moments to tear down that wall and to basically get rid of the tyranny that we used to call the Soviet Union and the Iron Curtain. He also did, as you appropriately pointed out, great things with apartheid, and he took leadership and he took on difficult issues that weren't easy to do, but he took them on because they were the right thing to do. And
it was, as I said, it was a more civilized conservatism than we have in the States today. I often wonder whether a prime minister like Brian Mulroney, a true progressive conservative, could have gotten along with for example, a Donald Trump. It's a different kind of conservative era.
Well, I don't know about that.
Although Brian Mulroney could get along with anybody, but that's
my point, Beryl. Mr. Mulroney has proven to be the consummate consensus builder. He was able to bring people around the table who had very diverse points of views. Let's not forget Mr. Mulroney's key role he played in renegotiating NAFTA on behalf of the Trudeau government, one of the few successes that Mr. Trudeau has had as Prime Minister. one of the leads on that in dealing with the Trump administration at the time was Prime Minister Mulroney. So I think there was no challenge too grand that he would not rise to the occasion for, and that's what true leadership is all about. I remind your audience, he's the only Prime Minister in a constitutional negotiation got every single premier, not once but twice, to sign on a constitutional accord.
You anticipated my next question. You were very close to him through the years. How we know through the history books, but perhaps you could share this with our listeners. He was very much touched personally and disappointed personally by the failures of Charlottetown and Meech. Can you shed some light on that?
Absolutely. He's somebody who deeply loved his province of Quebec, deeply loved his country. He understood, probably better than any other leader in my lifetime, the challenges between the two founding people in this country and the two founding languages. And he always knew that it was essential for any prime minister to focus on national unity. So Meech Lake was a difficult task, and no prime minister tried to make the country whole before then or since then. And he managed to convince 10 premiers in 10 provinces to sign a deal. He believed it was important for the future of the country. He believed there was unfinished business by the 82 repatriation leaving out Quebec. And I know some people will say that were his greatest failure as prime minister. But like I said, I think he showed us during those negotiations that if somebody was not timid and timorous, but was ambitious and bold, they can and have the capacity to bring people together, that it could be done. And I think, hopefully down the line in the future prime ministers will look at Charlottetown and Meech Lake as a grand effort to make the country whole rather than a failure.
Senator Leo Housakos, I thank you for your time. I'll end with one question. We know the state funeral is going to be on March the 23rd in Montreal. Any word yet on where in Montreal?
The details are slowly coming out. We know it's the 23rd. We know that it's a state funeral, so he will be probably also received in Parliament of Canada, where he did many of these great things for a decade as Prime Minister. So I'm sure the details will be made public over the last few days. But I want to share this, that on many occasions when I had the privilege of sitting down with the Prime Minister, he always told me that public life is not about taking on the easy things. It's about taking on the difficult things. And he always also said that as Prime Minister, he tried to do not what was always popular, but what was right. And free trade, GST, acid trade accords, fighting apartheid, the list goes on and on and on. He has a legacy that will be remembered for many, many, many years to come.
Senator Leo Housakos, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and reflections on the Right Honourable Brian Mulroney, passed away last week at the age of 84. Thank you, Lee.
Beryl.
My colleague Chelsea St. Pierre has been busy this week on the West Island, but there's a particular new initiative, a new irritant from Quebec that she wrote on, and it's not just the West Island, although it certainly affects the non-francophone part of the population more, but it affects all of Quebec in how we're going to grow, how our economy is going to grow. So Quebec now wants all those little instructions on appliances and on cars, on, off, gas, empty, to be in French. They want the actual words implanted on the appliance, on the vehicle, in the plastic, on the steel. Now, you can't get it done right away. Well, Quebec's very generous, and our Quebec language, for the Office Québécois de langue française, is very generous, and they're going to let you put stickers on, as if the 2% of the North American market that Quebec represents is going to force all the manufacturers to do stickers. Chelsea St. Pierre, welcome to the Suburban News Hour again. What's been the reaction from people in business when they heard of this latest nonsense?
Look, Beryl, I mean, it's completely ridiculous. We're going to lose business. We're going to lose the competition. The prices are going to go up, and essentially that's going to affect the consumer. Our market is going to fall apart. Megan Hatch told us. Megan Hatch from Appliance Manufacturers Canada told us that their company, conducted a survey to get a sense of how many of their manufacturers that they deal with would be willing to comply just to continue to keep their Quebec sales alive. 90% said they wouldn't. It's not worth it for them. There's a cost associated with this compliance, and the Quebec market is just not that attractive. Especially, this is not the first time they've been forced to pivot, so they know it will likely just happen again somewhere down the line. And they can still sell in Ontario, and consumers can still cross the border.
Can you imagine what will happen when Quebec, if certain manufacturers stop shipping into Quebec? So what's remaining, the remaining manufacturers will up their prices because of scarcity. And when Quebec sees their sales taxes going down, their revenues going down, it's very possible we're going to be hit with increased taxes to make up for their language policies. Not for the first time.
It's a definite possibility, and there are even blocks from being able to sell online directly to the consumer. So if you thought that, well, okay, I can't pick up my appliances at Canadian Tire now, the preferred appliance that I want because they don't sell there, I'll order it on Amazon. Well, guess what? You can't, because they're blocked online also. So we saw this in 2021. The other way around, when we broke the story of Mario Tremblay. Do you remember that story? He had the robotics online. Yeah, so he's selling, different robotics items. He could be selling from China to Japan. He just so happened to have his business registration here in Quebec. So the OQLF came to knock on his door and say, you know what, you have to put all of this stuff in French. And they wanted to fine him for all of these items that he was putting up online because they didn't have French inscriptions. Some of them don't even have French names. So, whichever way you want to go, we're becoming prisoners here. And
you got quite a reaction. I mean, our good friend Jamie Benizri, very well-known lawyer, but also very well-known entrepreneur, had some interesting words for Quebec on this latest nonsense.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and Jamie is perfectly bilingual, and, he speaks a lot on many issues, related to entrepreneurs, also legal issues, obviously, as he's a lawyer. But he's a loud voice in Montreal when it comes to these things. He's not, he's definitely turned off by this, and it does change the business market. He has plenty of clients that are affected by this on a regular basis, either local retailers or people selling online. Like I said, they're turning us into these prisoners that are going to live here, forced to buy consumer goods that are going to be very limited and very expensive. So, I mean, add that to inflation and rising housing costs, just to help Quebec move along and, let them continue investing into the OQLF, millions of dollars of our tax money.
Chelsea St. Pierre, thanks very much. Great job. Listeners, take a look at this article, Sticker Law, latest language irritant. Now, it's always a pleasure to welcome my colleague Joel Goldenberg. Joel, good evening.
Hi, how are you?
There's a lot that you've covered this week. We're going to be talking about a lot of the stuff that was in the streets of Montreal, but we'll do that next week. I'd like to just get your impression from your front page article in the Court of Appeal ruling on Bill 21. I don't know, when you went out to get reaction, did you feel that people were surprised that the court upheld Bill 21 as constitutional, or that they upheld the use of the notwithstanding clause as strongly as it did, or both?
Well, actually, to be honest, a lot of people weren't too aware of Bill 21 or the judgment in itself. I had to explain it to them.
They had forgotten. 4 years is too long to hold a thought in mind. Sorry, I'm being sarcastic.
Right. Thoughts were somewhat divided. I mean, some people think people shouldn't be wearing the, religious clothing and symbols on the job, and some people think half and half, that some should and some shouldn't be able to.
EMSB had a lot invested in this case. What was Joe Ortonio's reaction, the chairman's reaction? Do you get the impression that they will be appealing at the Supreme Court?
They had to study it for a while, but they feel very strongly about it. Especially, they feel that they did have a strong case, and now they'll be studying it. And I have a feeling they may well appeal it, but we'll see.
Now, you've been on the streets this week with the little mob that took over Federation CJA's entrance, which will be in the news for a while, because the next day there was an injunction obtained against these groups gathering on the property of Jewish institutions. Just very briefly, and I recommend Joel's article in the paper this week. How did it feel Monday night with people in Federation CJA's building not being able to get out because of this group of 60 protesters on their property?
Well, it's certainly intimidating, but as a kind of Kosinlu counselor, Dita Burku, told me, she was struck, she was pushed, and it's a scary thing. But unfortunately, the police didn't really. Federation CJ is looking into it, but the police didn't really move them for quite a while from the property of Federation. They were able to intimidate people, and those who were support Israel were kept across the street quite strictly by the police. On the other hand.
And you will be writing up the work on the injunction. That's a bit of history. The first injunction that was issued in North America to protect Jewish institutions was issued the next day. Great efforts of Attorney Neil Oberman, and that'll be coming up in this coming week's paper. And you really have to take a look at it to understand the depth of this issue and the depth of fear in a community. And finally, the law steps in where sometimes, as Joel said, the police won't. Joel Goldenberg, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is Suburban News Hour on CJD 800.